So my name is Okorie Johnson. I perform under the name OK Cello. From time to time, you may see my name written as Okorie OK Cello Johnson. I'm honored to be here with you. I'm always honored to have an opportunity to share my work and my art with audiences. I'm honored for another reason. I used to be a teacher, and so I love, all right, yes. I love being connected to communities that care about education. And so I want to acknowledge that we are on the land of the Muskogee Creek and the Cherokee nations here in Georgia. That is the community, that is the nations. Those are the nations that were here in Georgia. And what I believe the point of land acknowledgements, what I believe the point of acknowledging the land that we're on is to acknowledge the fact that people are and were here. And here's what I mean by that. I think the first of all sacred things is here-ness. And I think the first thing that is violated when people are violated is their sense of here-ness. Not only do I believe that here-ness is the first of all sacred things, I believe that we never are not here. When you occupy a place, your energy, your essence, your history, your culture, it stays in that place. And in that way, our here-ness is perhaps not only the most sacred thing that we have, but it is the thing that connects all of us. And I think it is also the thing that motivates those of us who teach. When we have students in front of us, we are all here in this room together, and there is a sacredness, there is an obligation to honor the sacred conspiracy of circumstances that brought us all together in this place, and that will allow us all to remain in this place and in this space. And so in that way, when I play, when you speak, when you do your work, we are always working for those spirits, those souls that are here with us continually. So I'd like to play a piece that I wrote called Here. I wrote it for a deeper learning symposium that I was invited to be a part of in Louisville, Kentucky. It was my first time being invited there. And as I was part of the symposium, as I was going to the workshops, the thing that struck me the most is that what a beautiful privilege it is to be able to be in a classroom with students and to experience the here-ness of that moment and to prepare those minds for the here-ness that they will experience in the future. So this is the song, Here. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nicole Rogriguez Leach. I am the new Executive Director of Grantmakers for Education. Thank you. And it is really my great honor to welcome you all to the 27th Annual Conference. Okorie, as he leaves the stage, I just want to offer another thank you for your incredible artistry, for grounding us in this space, in this place here. Really, thank you. Okorie has really set a tone for us for the next 3 days together. And I want to share a little bit more. Let me see if this will work. Okay, so actually Okorie and I go way back. He mentioned that we've known each other for some time. So I'm the one with the star on my t-shirt here. Okorie's standing right above me. We were about 1920? Yes, those good old days. We were college students teaching in a program called Summerbridge Germantown at the Philadelphia site. It's now known as another, the name has changed for that organization. But the spirit and the mission remains the same. And it's really to support middle school students and young emerging, burgeoning teachers to develop them as learners and as leaders. And Okorie and I had the real privilege and honor of teaching together and learning together at that time and ever since. So full circle moment indeed. I think, as you can imagine, right, even just hearing and watching Okorie now, Okorie used to bring his cello into the classroom. And all the rest of us would be like, man, how are we going to top that in our classes, of course? There's no like beautiful music wafting into the hallways that's happening necessarily, right? But our task was really to figure out how we create our own music and our own craft as teachers. And more importantly, how we helped our students create their own music and their own craft as learners and as leaders. And for me, what has been so deeply profound in that work has been the example of my peers, like Okorie in this instance. And I think that kind of real deep internal reflection and reflexivity that I was kind of trained in this early age to embody. It is something that I have kind of has traveled with me in my own practice. Well, I would love for us to continue to look at these young folks on this stage. I'll move us on. Really, this early experience left a lasting imprint on me, and it really helped for me craft a way of being. Professionally, that was really rooted in this personal purpose. And so it has traveled with me, right? This sense of reflexivity and this real intention around connectivity over my various roles and such over my career, right? From those early years in the classroom to community-based organizations that I worked with, to corporate boardrooms and foundation boardrooms, to university classrooms and research centers, and now to ed funders. So it's really my joy to be here. Again, another full circle moment for me, but really carrying this deep sense of reflexivity, kind of personal introspection, and kind of outward looking with my peers, with students and families, with colleagues like all of you. I bring these traits very much to my leadership. So you all should, some of you I know, some of you I do not. Over the next few days I surely will. You should know, however, that I have a fairly long history with Grantmakers for Education. I was, like many of you, a member. I have attended 10 of the 11 conferences in the last 11 years. This is by far one of the events that I look forward to most, for sure. I was a board member for a number of years, stepped away from philanthropy, and am now back. And that also feels like another full circle moment. One of my favorite sessions at conference, and Mark, if you're in here, was a session done maybe some 5-6 years ago by Mark Chun, called Oblique Strategies for Equity. I still have my little ring. I don't know if anyone here was in that session. But in that session, Mark asked us to consider other ways of doing our work. That sometimes in our own personal grant-making practice, in our organizational processes and approaches, we continue to do the same thing that becomes kind of tradition for us, typical for us. And for better, worse, or indifferent, it leads us to have some of the same types of processes and practices, even when our intention is to change, or to transform, or to work with others to do that in their own practice. And so in that session, we had a series of interactive activities, and Mark had assembled and asked us to think about some prompts. One of the things that I do periodically, because I've kept these cards ever since, is I'll pull it out and randomly come to a prompt and think about how I follow that prompt with whatever directive I'm focused on at that point. So this morning, I pull out a prompt, and it says, play out the complete opposite approach. So while the next few days we won't be playing out any complete opposite approach, right? This event is very well crafted and designed. I do appreciate, though, walking through the sessions and the hallways and our conversations together, thinking about not just what we do, but what if we did something differently? What could that look like? What does it look like? And how do we put those pieces back together? Speaking of this incredible few days lined up for us, I want to acknowledge my colleagues on the Ed Funders team that are here today. So I'll ask you to stand, if you don't mind. But please join me in giving a round of applause for our staff. So Kyle, Ulka, Bev, Rebecca, who's in the back. I'm including Emily and Paul. I'm including Bev and Jesse, Kara, if I got anyone. You'll see them with orange lanyards throughout the day and throughout these days. Please just say hello, say thanks, continue to build some relationship with them. And also over the next few days, I'll continue to acknowledge everyone for whom their support and sponsorship of this conference would not have been possible. So we have this year's premier sponsor, which is Walton Family Foundation. And then there are many others of you in this room. I am deeply grateful. Our entire team is deeply grateful. And it's really wonderful to have your support now and as we move forward. So over the next few days together, we're going to explore and examine the pursuit of justice in education and the unique capabilities of education philanthropy in this process. Our theme, In Pursuit of Justice, Creating Context to Thrive, picks up where last year's conference left off, with a call to embrace the importance of the conditions and the contexts of learning, and to grapple with the form and function of education organizations and systems in the social fabric, including our own, right? Including education philanthropy. So I urge us to consider these ideas, and more than ideas, to really think about what they actually mean. What do they look like in the way that you approach your own grant making, both personally and organizationally, in all the places and spaces and partnerships where you work? So no matter if you're in early childhood or post-secondary, out of school time, if you're working at hyperlocal levels, state work, national work, no matter your approach, I ask us to ask ourselves, what is the public promise of education in a multiracial, multicultural democracy? What are the conditions, those processes, practices, policies that we so often reference, but don't always define? What are they that we need to use to work toward that promise? And then what are the practices of education philanthropy that helps toward its realization? Not just what we say, but what we do. How are we accountable? Where is our integrity? Where do we have clarity and precision of purpose, and even common purpose in our organizations and across our field? These are the questions that are sitting with me as we walk through these next few days. So we're poised to have important conversations this week that dig deep, that inspire new thinking, that engage, that make connections with new friends and colleagues, longtime friends and colleagues in the room, and forge collaboration. We have a few days of learning new tools and tactics to advance your goals. I had the incredible fortune of being at Morehouse College yesterday on a pre-conference site visit. There we heard from young Morehouse men, and we had a chance to visit the archives where some of Dr. King's letters were brought out for us to view. Really special. And I walk away from that day thinking about how critical it is that we anchor ourselves in an ethic and an ethos of deep connection, deep care, and profound creativity. I am excited. I love conference. This was always a highlight of my year. So I'm excited still standing here to imagine, to examine, to interrogate, to build with each of you over the next few days. I'll see you in sessions. I'll see you in the halls again over lunch. But please, stop me in the hall. I'm happy to have a conversation anytime. Perhaps not in the restroom. But I'll be listening deeply. And as I'm wrestling and thinking about the questions that I shared earlier, that's what I'll be listening for. So I'll pause now because I want to be here. And I want to invite someone who will also welcome us and help us be here. We're gathered in this beautiful city of Atlanta with a history of strength and creativity, resistance, refusal, and partnership. And so I have the pleasure of welcoming to you and introducing to you Kathy Waller. Come on up, Kathy. Kathy is the executive director of Atlanta Committee for Progress, which provides leadership on key issues important to the economic growth and inclusion for all citizens of Atlanta, which includes education. Herself, a titan, I would like to say, of the business community and beyond, has a deep and broad financial and operational expertise gained in, I will let you say, many years at the Coca-Cola Company. She has led transformations and visioning processes at this kind of massive institution called the Coca-Cola Company. She's also formed the Women's Leadership Council. She sits on numerous boards and many more accolades and accomplishments. Ultimately, a real rock star. So please join me in welcoming Kathy to help us settle in this space. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll take my cards. Thank you.
So good morning. As you heard, my name is Kathy Waller. I am currently the executive director of the Atlanta Committee for Progress. The Atlanta Committee for Progress is a public-private partnership between 40 corporate, civic, and academic leaders and the mayor of the city of Atlanta. The initiatives the committee focuses on are based on the priorities of the mayor. I'm happy to welcome you to our city, the home of Martin Luther King Jr., Maynard Jackson, and John Lewis. We are thrilled to have this extraordinary gathering of minds and hearts dedicated to shaping the future of education in America and making sure that all learners thrive in education systems that are equitable and just. Many of you are probably aware that our mayor declared 2023 the Year of the Youth in Atlanta. In fact, we have a special friend who wants to add his welcome this morning.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for gathering in Atlanta for the 2023 Grantmakers for Education Annual Conference. You have dedicated yourselves to supporting education through philanthropy and making a real difference throughout the United States. Your work is invaluable and reinforces our city's commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusivity. Human and civil rights icon Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education." He envisioned a world where everyone, regardless of their background, had equal opportunities to learn, succeed, and contribute to the betterment of our society. Because of your work, that vision has become a reality for countless individuals. I couldn't be prouder of the progress you've made on the path towards equitable education and philanthropy. Thank you.
So I, like you, believe that education is key to unlocking human potential. The world continues to rapidly change with new and better innovations continually being introduced. Yet sadly, today, everyone can't partake of the benefits of these innovations. There are too many people that are left out and unable to take advantage of these innovations. I am heartened that a group like this comes together to collaborate, connect, and forge new partnerships that will propel your collective efforts towards making a quality education more attainable. I'm grateful that you are dedicated to helping every learner receive the best education possible, and I'm hopeful that this group, as well as others, will find the solutions that unlock human potential and support the development of comprehensive and inclusive systems of learning where everyone benefits. I know the work you strive to do isn't easy, but the reward for success is great. Over the next couple of days, you will engage in thought-provoking discussions, share innovative strategies, and learn from one another's successes and setbacks. I hope that when you leave this conference, you are energized and have a renewed sense of purpose as your ideas and solutions generated this week can make a real difference in the lives of many people. The status quo is unacceptable. So it's not only the right thing to ensure that every student has the opportunity to thrive, but the continued success and growth of our economy depends on every citizen contributing. Again, I am thrilled to welcome you to Atlanta. I have no doubt that the collective passion and expertise gathered in this room and throughout this conference will achieve remarkable and lasting change. I'm excited you're here. I'm excited for the future of education. I'm excited for generations of children and adult learners who will be impacted by your leadership. Personally, I've always been a dreamer. I believe and I've seen the benefits of dreaming and dreaming big. So I hope this conference is where dreams are born, ideas are ignited, and the future of a great education being available to everyone comes into sight. Please have a wonderful conference. Thank you.
All right, well, let's get started. We have a conference that has several plenary sessions each day. And over the week, starting today, we'll dive into the context of education in the US currently. We'll dive into technology's impact on learning and the careers of tomorrow when we gather tomorrow. And on Thursday, the educational system's change as a path toward racial justice. Each plenary will start with a firestarter, who'll set the stage and ignite ideas. And so today, we're joined by Dr. Manuel Pastor, Distinguished Professor of Sociology and American Studies and Ethnicity at University of Southern California, where he directs the USC Equity Research Institute. Dr. Pastor's research is generally focused on issues of economic, environmental, and social conditions facing low-income urban communities, and the social movements seeking to change those realities. And so today, Dr. Pastor will delve into the US current socio-political context, trends, shifting demographics, and provide a framework for us to think about how building a movement toward a future that works for all of us is possible. As note, his firestarter will be followed by a performance by two students, Elijah and Elias Goss, who are here with us, who among other accolades and accomplishments are ranked third in the nation in speech and debate. They are intellectuals, artists, athletes, servant leaders, and they aim to help those around them and change the world for the better. Today, they'll be performing a piece called I Am. On your table are some copies of the words for that piece, including a QR code, should there not be enough copies on your table, that links to their site to learn more about them and also to the piece. An award-winning piece. And so we're in for a real treat. And then I'm sure what will be a very tough act to follow, we'll have a panel that will explore the ways of engaging in a shared vision for education, for policies that prepare learners as members of civil society in the workforce. This panel will be moderated by Maria Saporta, an Atlanta-based journalist who reports on business, civic, and urban affairs, and is committed to strengthening Atlanta's civic fabric. But first, let's be here. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Manuel Pastor to the stage.
Thank you. Coming from California, one worries about being a fire starter, given some of the risks of climate change in our area. But hopefully you will be ignited with some knowledge and some passion. I always like to let folks know as I'm getting started that if, while I'm speaking to you, my voice breaks or tires out, you might think that it's because I'm emotional being with a bunch of educators. I am. My wife is a retired school superintendent. She retired after dealing with 3 years of COVID. So she is my hero or heroine, and all of you have been through that. What a difficult period of time. But it's not that my voice will break. It's that actually I have a speech condition that's called spasmodic dysphonia, spasms around the voice box. It's actually now famous because that's what Robert Kennedy Jr. has, his scratchy voice. So if my voice wasn't treated, I would sound like him. I would not be as delusional as he is. But my voice would sound like him. And I always like to let people know, to reassure you that it actually gets treated, and this is true, once a month with Botox, because that's how we treat everything in Los Angeles. It totally works for us. So as I was mentioning, we've been through a difficult last 3 years, certainly in education, certainly for so many of our families, for so many of us who saw relatives pass away or get sick or now be suffering from long COVID. But in many ways, COVID was the disease that revealed our illnesses as a society. The racial wealth gap, which meant that some did not have a cushion to survive when the economy went into lockdown. The tenuous nature of legal status, which meant that so many of our families, 20% of our families in Los Angeles County, from which I hail, were not able to access aid from the first CARES package. Or, of course, the digital divide and the way in which that which many thought didn't exist, actually was sharply illustrated by the COVID pandemic. So it was the disease that revealed our illnesses, our fundamental inequalities, and all of this occurred as we also had the murder of George Floyd, something which made evident not only the racist nature of policing, but the fact that racist policing was the tip of a racist iceberg in terms of inequalities in education, in our economy, and even in the environment. And so we are in a, I would argue, moment of fundamental realization and potentially fundamental transformation. And while many have talked about the need to recover from the pandemic, why would you want to recover to a normal that did not work for so many? We need not recovery, but rather reimagination, restructuring, and renewal. Because we are in this fundamental moment in the United States where really what is at stake is the nature of multiracial democracy, which we have not had for that long, and it has not been that complete, and yet it is under threat right now. We are also under threat from rising inequality. So what are those long-term trends? Let's look first at the changing demographics of the country. As many of you know, the United States is now slated to become majority people of color by about the year 2044, 2045. It is a prospect that fills many with dread, that is the sense of their America slipping away from them, and it is fueling the corrosive and divisive politics that provide a context for all of what you do. Why else would people be wanting to remove teaching about racism from our schools unless they were threatened by what the future might bring of having to reconcile with the past and having to set new terms for the future? So some are deeply frightened by it. Others, like me, I'm from Los Angeles County. We became majority people of color in the year 1988. All I can think is, oh, fantastic. The rest of the United States will experience the joy of a Korean taco truck. And I just don't know why you're so worried. And it is, of course, the case that we did go through that. If you go back to this previous chart, if you look at the demographic change in the United States between 2000 and 2050, going from being about 69% non-Hispanic white to about 48% non-Hispanic white, that is basically the change that California went through between 1980 and 2000. California was America fast forward. And that period in California was filled with tremendous tension. Proposition 187, which sought to strip away all sorts of services, including education, from undocumented residents of the state, the attacks and elimination of bilingual education and affirmative action, the racial propositions of the 1990s. That turmoil is what the United States is going through right now. What is interesting about this is that this demographic change, particularly in the United States, is not really being driven by what most people, at least in the popular discourse, think it's driven by. So for example, most people think that the demographic change in the United States is being driven by immigration. And if you look at this chart, you can see that between 1990 and about 2007, right on the cusp of the Obama election, it's actually 2008, the share of foreign born in the country went up by about 8% to about 12.5%. Now, since 2007, with all of the turmoil around immigration, there's been a startling increase in the share of foreign born from about 12.5 to about 13.6. Like, hardly anything at all. And in fact, demographers are mostly worried that we don't have enough immigrants coming into the United States. So what is driving the demographic change? It's what you know about. It's actually children. So if you look at this chart between 2000 and 2021, the number of young whites in the United States actually fell by about 9 million. Now, that does not mean that 9 million young white people died. We would have noticed that. It would have been reported on Fox News with great alarm, blamed on Obama because who knows, right? There would have been a shortage of demand for avocado toast. But what's really going on is that more young whites are moving into 18 and 19 than moving into 0 and 1. So number of young whites is declining, number of young black folks in the country declining, although actually about almost all of that is young black folks now marking multicultural, even or multiracial, even though they didn't so much in the past. Most of this growth is occurring through the Latino, young youth Latino population and the young AAPI population. So the other interesting thing about this is where it's occurring. So if you think about it, California experienced this huge demographic change. So what most people imagine is that that demographic change occurring in the rest of the country is going to still occur just in California. That somehow by the year 2050, California will become 150% Latino. They'll be sort of super Chicanos marching the earth, declaring, Aslan, we're back, la reconquista, right? But what's going on, which is interesting, is that the share of immigrants in the United States who live in California has actually declined dramatically from about a third of all immigrants in the United States living in California to less than a quarter. You can see this as well, just focusing in on Latinos. And what I want you to look at is California here in 1990 had about 35% of all the Latinos in the United States. Look at the South. The South had only 3.6%. When we move to the current period, California's only got about a quarter, and the share of Latinos living in the South has gone up to about 10%. So you've noticed that. For those of you who are here in Atlanta, it's not just been the reverse Great Migration of northern black folks moving to Atlanta, but it's actually also been growing immigrant, Latino, and AAPI presence. And interestingly, particularly in your suburbs and not as much in your central city, that's a phenomenon occurring all over the United States. What does that look like geographically? This is the United States in 1980. The darker the shade, the higher the percent people of color. The darkest shade means more than 50% people of color. The shade in between 40 to 50% is sort of a tipping point for neighborhoods and counties. In 1980, interesting thing for you to take a look at is that we basically had the black belt of the South going up to DC, the borderlands of Texas with Mexico, the Hispanic and Native American areas of New Mexico and Arizona, Native American areas of the Dakotas. Look at California. There was only one county that was majority people of color. That was Imperial County on the border with Mexico. What happened going from 1980 forward? That's 1990. That's 2000. A lot of change, but a lot of change in California. 2010, a lot of change in California, but you can see it starting to happen in the rest of the country. This is the most recent census, and this is where we'll be 40 years from now. I like that noise you just made. So a couple things about this. Except for parts of the Midwest and New England, diversity is coming to a theater near you. And in some unexpected places. Look at, for example, in Utah, turns out that Salt Lake City is going to become majority people of color before the country does. Now, I know what you're thinking. Salt Lake, that's not just white, that's shiny white, right? That's Book of Mormon white, right? But it's a place that's had a big influx of migrants from both Latin America and from Africa, so lots of change. Last bit about demography that I think is interesting has to do with the median age structure, meaning median age is half older, half younger. Median age for whites in the United States, it's about 44 years old. Median age for Asian Americans, about 37. For Black and Native Americans, around 35. For Latinos, about 30. 44, 30, 14 years, it's a generation gap, or nearly a generation gap. And it helps to explain our national politics because we have an older generation looking at a younger generation and not seeing itself and not making the investments that are necessary for that younger generation to thrive. That is not something we will change by changing the demographics, no matter how much some people wish it would. It's something we will change by reconnecting the generation with a new story of commonality. And to do that, I want to talk a little bit about economics and then minding the clock here, come to a stirring and emotional conclusion. So, aside from the big demographic change, one thing we've had, along with this kind of fear of multiracial democracy actually being multiracial democracy, is the economic anxiety produced by growing income inequality. The blue line shows you the share of income in the United States going to the top 1%. You can see that it's higher now than at any time since the early 20th century. It's one of the reasons why there's so much labor protest now and why it's focused, interestingly, not so much on how workers have been left behind as on how much the CEOs are making. That's the first time I've ever seen in a strike the UAW tying its demand to how much Mary Barra makes. That's fascinating. And it makes sense because in the 1960s, the average CEO made about 30 times what the average worker makes. Now, the average CEO makes about 350 times. They're not 15 times more productive. So there's something amiss, and that nature of something being amiss actually shows up too for those below the top 1%, here more for professional middle class. This is the way in which income has gone up for full-time year-round workers who are at the 90th percentile. 10% make more, 90% make less. At the 80th percentile, 20% make more, 80% make less, et cetera. What you can see are the gray bars is that for full-time year-round workers, if you're at the top of the wage earning distribution, that you can see that your incomes have gone up. If you're at the bottom, they've gone down. That process was actually on steroids in California. Again, America fast forward. It's resulted in significant racial inequality, and you are right to point to the nature of education. But one thing I want to be very clear on, and I'll jump over a couple this slide to get to this slide, is the following. This shows you, as you move from left to right, what happens to wages as you get more and more income. As you move from less than a high school degree to having a high school degree, some college, an AA degree, and a BA degree or higher. And you can see the story that your parents told you, which is that if you get an education, your income will go up. But you can also see here that at each and every level of income, there is a wage penalty for Black earners, for Latino earners, and for Asian earners until you get to the BA or higher, in which you actually see an erosion of the difference between white and Asian earners, but you still see significant wage penalties for Black and Latino earners who have a BA degree or higher. I say that because, like you, I believe education is important, but it's not going to eliminate everything unless we challenge structural racism, unless we challenge discrimination in labor markets, unless we challenge the tenuous nature of legal status for so many Latinos, unless we challenge the network effects that mean that some get recommended for positions and others never know what those positions are. So yes, we have to focus on education, but we can't accept that as the easy answer. And we also need to understand something very fundamental. This shows you median household income by race and ethnicity in the United States for different ethnic groups. And you can see here what you might expect, white household income being higher than Black and Latino household income. You might not expect that Asian household income is that high. One thing to be very clear about, of all the ethnic populations, the Asian population is the most heterogeneous, meaning that there's South Asian engineers making a lot of money, and there's Vietnamese hotel cleaners making very little. And that those gaps within that community are wider than they are in the Black community, Latino community, and white community. And so when you look at statistics about Asians, you need to be careful. But looking at this, same chart, same geography of the United States, same ethnic groups. Now we're going to focus in on families that are raising children under the age of 5. Watch what happens to those wage gaps. They increase dramatically. So essentially, we're baking inequality into the future. So let me just move to some words, because some of you may have not been enthralled by those graphs because you don't like graphs. If you don't like graphs, I don't like you. But let me make a few words, general points that are sort of more words for those of you who are that oriented. So last couple things to leave you with. First, recall the moment we're in. It is fundamental, and the decisions that we make will set the course not just for a year or two, but really whether we fall into a fascist abyss or whether we move to a beloved community. And in order to do that, we need to remember something that Van Jones actually once said about the March on Washington, that when Martin Luther King gave his famous speech, it was not called, "I have an issue." And too often, we have an issue rather than a vision and a dream. How do we unite people around a dream? By the way, there's a great new book about this that I wrote. It will be made into a major motion picture in which I will be portrayed by Antonio Banderas, so I'm very excited. But you can actually download the book for free at solidarityeconomics.org, and there's a comic book version of it in English and Spanish for popular education. So we also need to be measuring what matters, and those of you who know about equity metrics, know about this project we do with PolicyLink, the National Equity Atlas. You could actually create a lot of the graphs I've used today from that website. But the last thing I want to leave you with is a story, and I think the kind of story we need to tell. And it's my story, but like many of you, my story begins a generation earlier when my dad arrived in the United States with papers that were imperfect. And when World War II came, he was given a choice between being deported or joining the US Army. And he couldn't figure out what to do. This is true. He gave a penny to my cousin Carlitos, who flipped it. And that's how the decision was made. He and the penny went to war, came back safe. A generation later, his son is a full professor with an endowed chair at the University of Southern California. And what I like to tell people is, that's a great story, it's an American story, and it's the wrong story. It's the wrong story because when it's told like that, what it sounds like is an individual family and their hard work, their ganas, their desires to get ahead. And I don't deny the hard work of my mother or father or even some of the work I might have put in. But in the 1930s, when my dad had no papers, there was a union to defend his rights at work. And when he came home from the war, there was a GI Bill. And that GI Bill meant that he, a guy with a 6th grade education, could go to a community college and learn about electricity and go from being a janitor to repairing industrial air conditioners, and the family could go from being poor, you know that kind of poor where you open up the refrigerator and close it? To go from that kind of poor to being solidly working class. And we were able, he and my mom, to buy a home in a town east of East LA called La Puente, because there was a GI Bill that provided assets for him to be able to do it, and because of a civil rights movement that struck down racially restrictive covenants and opened up that neighborhood. And there was public schools that I went to that were decent because we were investing in them. And when it came time to go to the university, there was affirmative action to take a chance on a kid like me that did not fit the typical profile. And that's the American story. It is a story of families striving, but it is a story of the public policies put in place for people to be successful, and it is a story of the social movements, the labor movement, the veterans movement, the educators movement, the civil rights movement that made those public policies possible. So fight for justice.
Hello, everyone. I'm Elijah Goss.
And I'm Elias Goss.
We forgot to do the mic check, but I guess it works now.
Right, there you go.
As you can see, it took me longer than some of my grandparents to get up here.
Don't say that. Don't say that. Grandma's gonna watch this later.
Sorry, Grandma. Yeah, I suffered an injury a couple weeks ago, but everything should be all right. I just ask that you guys keep an open mind and let the magic happen.
And speaking of open-mindedness, the performance that we are prepared for you guys today is actually in theme with the conference here today, and we just ask that you guys try to immerse yourself into the performative storytelling that we're gonna try to give for you guys.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Novice Speech and Debate. It's your first day of school, and I want us to get to know each other, so I'm gonna give you some homework. I know, worst teacher ever. But I want you to write a poem using the prompt, I am.
I am. I am. I mean, it's 2 words, a prompt, a sentence starter, a simple seed that when planted inspires introspection. It's 10 p.m. after your first day of school, and your mom is gone on yet another 12-hour shift, so you're the man of the house now.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not a man.
Aw.
You're just a 14-year-old boy trying to do his homework before 11:59 p.m. Simple enough, right? Oh!
Upstairs, you can hear the sounds only unattended toddlers can make, and you pray that they haven't broken anything while mom's gone. You had just finished cooking dinner and cleaning the mess that followed, so with a spaghetti-stained shirt, you sit on your couch, try to hop on your school-provided hotspot, and try to open a document on your school-provided Chromebook.
Your computer finally cooperates, but the only 2 words you can write were, I am. So you look at the document, and you ask yourself the question, who are you? I mean, the question usually was,
Boy, who do you think you are?
Followed by them telling me exactly who they thought I was. To my mom, I was a child in what was called
Grown folks' business.
To my teachers and peers, I was
Surprisingly articulate. You know, you're one of the good ones.
Or I was a statistic. Either a victim or a criminal to the media. So with 3 younger siblings to put to bed and a mountain of other responsibilities to attend to, I decided to throw a couple rhyming words on a page and call it a night. I'm a black man.
Okay.
On the football field, I run as fast as I can.
Okay.
Crossing the threshold of the touchdown as I hear the screaming fans. Ah! Ah! And the crowd goes wild. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Elias.
And the Heisman Trophy goes to...
Elias. That's enough.
My bad.
Yeah.
As you can see, I was finishing this bestseller when I decided to take a break.
Breaking news. Body cam footage releases of Elijah McClain's arrest. Viewer discretion advised that some of the contents may seem graphic.
Elijah? That's my brother's name. I am sketchy. I don't know, man. He might be a good person or a bad person. No, I'm just an introvert. I'm just different. I'm sorry. I am being suspicious. I have the right to stop you. Stop resisting. Well, why are you detaining me? I didn't do anything. I don't do any of that stuff. I don't fight. I don't have any guns. I'm sorry. I am
135 pounds. Presented with excited delirium and should be administered 65 milligrams of ketamine.
I'm sorry. I'll do anything. I'll sacrifice my identity. Please forgive me. I am.
Elijah McClain was never suspected of a crime, nor was one reported. But although he tried, Elijah didn't get to tell the world his I am story.
And I sat there, and I listened to the story of Elijah McClain. Yet another unarmed black man who was stopped, detained, and killed by my hometown police and Aurora paramedics who filled him with enough ketamine to kill him. And no, he wasn't some thug or thief or superhuman whack job. He was a young man dancing on his way home to music after buying an iced tea. So I looked at my poem again. This surface level version of who I was, and I realized that it wasn't enough. I realized that I had almost sacrificed the opportunity to tell the world my story. Our story.
So calling me downstairs, me and my brother got to work.
The next day in class, it was my turn to present. I am a black man, a stereotype, a killer, a thug.
I'm a rapist, a gangbanger, and my job
is to mug. I am ignorant, a savage, nothing, no one.
I'm a little boy with the brush, but you think it's a gun.
I'm a black man who fits the description so the cops
It's shoot to kill. Keep your hands up and your license out.
That was my fire drill. I'm a black man so statistics show where I go, bullets follow. But I thought if I
Stayed in school, kids.
I'd be safe, but it turns out
AP US history books don't stop hollows. I'm a black man. We're like cows, always sent to slaughter.
But did you know before you killed him,
George Floyd was someone's father? I'm a black man. On your marks, get set, done.
For most black men, the race doesn't start, but it ends with a gun.
However, the mistake you made was thinking we were finished.
You see, the fight has just begun.
I'm a real black man.
Strong,
Caring,
and intelligent.
but it's funny how when you see my face,
those things become irrelevant.
you know, I learned at a young age that black was darkness and white was pure light.
But without the darkness that fills the night sky,
The stars wouldn't shine so bright. So you see, I'm a star maker
A caretaker.
with skin so divine.
I am proud of the pigment inside of me.
I am truly God's design.
I am smart.
Culture,
Something.
someone.
I'm a man with a cap and gown.
But you believed it couldn't be done.
But I'm a black man. Tired and frustrated.
But I'm not allowed to show it. The white man has always had an advantage, and yet they act like they don't know it.
I'm a black man in this world.
Failure is a price I cannot afford.
Weakness isn't an option.
My pain has to be ignored.
But I am brave.
I'm courageous.
My love is contagious.
I'm kind.
I am funny.
And I'm always on my grind.
I'm a legend in the making.
truly breathtaking.
I'm a valedictorian.
Written about by the historian.
I'm a music lover.
a twin and brother.
A light that shines like no other.
I'm a movie watcher.
A showstopper.
Raised by a wise father.
I'm a leader.
A reader.
An innovator.
Engineered for something greater.
So now you know who I am.
And Black Lives Matters, for which I stand.
Because in this world, we're all the same.
And I'm a black man, tired of saying another name.
Now, those of you who know the public education system, you know that getting high school teenagers to pay attention in class was like getting Swiper to stop swiping from Dora in Dora the Explorer.
Swiper, no swiping. Swiper, no swiping. Oh, man.
And for those of you who didn't just get that joke, I'm gonna assume the show was after your time.
Hola, soy Dora. Can you say old? Say old. Muy bien. Dora.
Okay, that's good.
Dora,
All right,
Dora.
yeah, we're good.
My bad. My bad.
But after we had performed this poem to the class, we realized something different. We noticed that all eyes were on us. And we took two things from this experience. One, Swiper didn't got nothing on us. And two, this was the first time more than 3 people had paid attention to what we had to say in the classroom. Each eye, each person, each teenager looked different. They had a focused look of inspiration, a look of soul. After the applause had subsided and we finished scanning the room, we noticed the look on my teacher, Noah Kaplan's face. He had a subtle smile different from the others, one that rested on a raised chin. He told us that he wanted to get this poem professionally recorded, and at first I thought he was joking. I mean us. 2 unsuspecting 14-year-olds wrote something worthy enough to be recorded, let alone professionally. But the look of disbelief never faded from my face, even after 2 weeks later when we were performing in front of the front steps of our school building. And I don't think that look faded for a very long time.
Since then, those front steps have turned into classrooms. Classrooms turned into auditoriums, and auditoriums turned into stages in front of thousands. We have been able to build connections with coaches and educators who have worked hard to ensure we could share our story across the country, leading us to the very stage on which we are standing now, a platform that will hopefully inspire a new wave in the continued support of children worldwide. And we owe it all to people like you, people who make it so our coaches and educators can ensure that students like me not only have, but take advantage of all of these new opportunities.
So we would like to give you all your own 2-word prompt. We would like to ask you all, what if? What if every school had a speech and debate program? What if its coaches and teachers didn't have to sacrifice their own time, money, and resources? What if there were after-school programs that were self-sustaining for my little siblings so I didn't have to be the man of the house when I'm home alone? What if there were mentorship programs for me to learn how to be the man of the house when the time comes? What if we create classroom environments where being articulate, or one of the good ones, wasn't a surprise? It was a standard. What if a child's potential wasn't dictated by their household income? What would be the impact of our children then? Kids who have a story to tell, but no one to give them a pencil and paper. a Chromebook or Wi-Fi, or even a teacher with enough resources in order for them to reach their full potential? What if we had the help of all of you? As funders, you have the ability to go above and beyond to make sure kids like me have the space to dream, the context to thrive, and the places to fight for what they believe in and seek justice in the places they reside. The effect that you have on students cannot be quantified by a number, a statistic, or a graph on a slideshow. I'm sorry, doctor, we don't like you either. So me and my brother are here as tangible representations of the hard work that you put in every single day. As funders and active participants in the support of children worldwide, you create countless stories and inspire countless opportunities. So thank you, and keep inspiring us to inspire others. Thank you guys so much. Thank you. We appreciate you. I can't move. All right.
Okay, I'm Maria Saporta. I have an independent website, Saporta Report. Here in Atlanta, I've been a journalist in this city for 43 years, but I was at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution for 27 of those years, and at the Atlanta Business Chronicle for 11 and a half. But I'm an Atlanta native. I grew up in where you experience exactly what we've heard, a city grappling with change and integration and, whoops, and how to do it. What I'd like to do is for our panel to self-introduce and to explain what role they have in this conversation that we have. And we'll start with my friend Kamau, Bobb. And introduce yourself, your title, and we want to be quick. We want to have a conversation. We want to get to the heart of the issues that are before us, because they are serious, they're critical, and we're in a room of change makers. So, come out.
Good morning. I'm old and intimidated by these two brothers, so I just want to shrivel. My name is Kamau Bobb. I am the Senior Director of the Constellation Center for Equity and Computing at Georgia Tech, and the Director of STEM Education at Google. I'm from New York, but I've been in Atlanta for about 20 years or so and heavily committed and engaged in the education dialogue.
I'm Jill Savitt. I'm the CEO of the National Center for Civil and Human Rights, which is a museum and cultural institution in downtown Atlanta that tells the history of the US civil rights movement and its connection to the global movement for human rights around the world. We are focused on teaching history accurately and increasing people's understanding of how they can play a role in changing the world around them.
My name is Abenezer, Haile. I am a first year at NYU, and I'm currently here with the National Student Board Members Association. I think I bring the perspective of a first-gen student that also has been in America for a long time, but has also experienced education outside of America too. And I've seen firsthand the views from a student, but also I was a former student board member on the Nashville public school education system, so I've seen in real time how policy works.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tracey Nance. I'm an Atlanta born and raised teacher, mother, and currently an educator and child ally. I'm the 2020-2021 Georgia Teacher of the Year and spent a significant amount of time traveling this state. I know the heart of our educators, of our students, and I've seen how significantly politics have entered our classroom and how it's impacted our kids.
And Manuel Pastor, and I've been had.
Okay, I'm going to throw the first question to the whole group. And what are the most pressing issues that you see in education today in the United States, and kind of how they impact what you do every day? Yeah, we'll just go down the line this way. We'll switch it up.
Well, I think it's clearly a grand topic. the nature of the stuff that I do is it has to do with STEM education, computing in particular. And I think one of the challenges that we face in Atlanta, for all of you who are visiting here, as it's been alluded to several times, but this is one of the most segregated cities in the country. And it's played out in the education structure as you'd expect. There are essentially 10 traditional public schools in Atlanta public schools, and only 3 of them have white students in it. So the quality of education is correlated exactly to the presence and proportion of white students. That's the only thing that seems to matter. And so to some extent, we're operating in the 1950s. And so we do have separate educational systems. We don't want to acknowledge it because saying separate but equal is a Dred Scott-like thing to say in America. However, that's what we have. So I think one of the things that's most challenging, kind of the subtext to the idea of what STEM education means, is confronting the segregation itself and acknowledging, if we were to acknowledge it and build a system according to the parameters of that segregation and the separateness, what would that be? And I think to those brothers' point, what if? It requires in some ways a concession to the greater American ideal, but it is the reality of what we have to deal with right now. So to me, that's the largest issue, from my opinion.
Jill. I think there's so many issues. I'll just choose one that's in the particular area where I work. I think as a country, we're suffering from a really bad case of truth decay. That what a fact is, what the truth is, what accuracy is up for grabs and debate. I took over as CEO 4 years ago at the museum, and the most common thing we hear from people is, I didn't know. I didn't know this history. I had no idea. And so even before truth became a contact sport, people already didn't have a full grasp of the rich history of our country. And at the same time, there are alternate narratives out in the world that are not factual, that are now competing. And so that is one huge thing about the teaching of history, and I also think the teaching of civics, because the other part of our mandate at our museum is how you get involved to change policy, how you get involved as an active citizen. And so the gap, the absence of historical knowledge and civic knowledge is what will prevent us from the movements and building coalitions that can actually change the systems that are producing all these problems that we see.
Yeah, I think it's a very tough question because obviously so many issues revolve around education, but for me, it always seems like, unlike the other progressive things that we want to tackle, we tend to limit how good education actually can be for students. And what I mean by that is, for example, I specialize in making sure that student voice is heard at the highest level. So when I work with NSBMA, we try to provide an institution that can, give students the highest amount of representation that they can get. And the very funny thing with that is students are the one specific demographic, and this is a line that you're going to be hearing from me for the rest of the session. Students are one of the few specific demographics that are 100% of the representative body, but 0% of the action-making body. And what that essentially means is that we tend to think of students being there or their presence as simply being enough, and we don't really let them be involved in the actual decision-making process. So as being a former student board member, there were times where I felt like it was seen as I was more of a token, and my presence simply being there in that environment was enough. And in reality, it's more of what I do with that position that really matters. And that was us limiting or setting the ceiling for how good education can be, because we're putting limits to what we can actually do when we get students to be involved in the actual decision making itself. And then outside of that, I think another is, and I think students recently are coming to this conclusion on their own, is that there is a lack of adaptability in education. It often seems like the curriculum and the norms set in education oftentimes focus on making a student ready for the workforce and not ready for the actual complexity of the world itself. And the lack of attention that we give to things outside of making the student someone that can be easily programmable by the employer makes it so that a person like me that joins the workforce at 18 or at 22 lacks the in-depth idea of how the world works. We only know how to take orders and then turn that into, product. And that comes from the fact that we don't often focus on the actual things that make a human being. We don't focus on the things that should happen in a classroom that don't necessarily have to do with curriculum.
Absolutely. It's well said. The most pressing issue, I want to tell you, it's kids' literacy and their social emotional needs, their mental health. But unfortunately, politicians have entered our classroom and there's a bright, shiny object attracting for those very important things. The most pressing matters right now is a full-on attack on our children's civil rights. And it's happening in multiple domains. And what that is leading to, not a teacher shortage. I really dislike it when we call it a shortage, because the truth is there's plenty of teachers and people capable of being phenomenal educators. The problem is a teacher respect issue. Teaching as a profession itself, we have to do better at uplifting it, at respecting our teachers' expertise, their professionalism, and letting us do our jobs.
Would you like to win?
Sure. I think the one big challenge is for Americans to do something which is very difficult for us, which is to hold two ideas in our head at the same time. And one, I think, is to stress the issues of racial equity and structural racism and forge common ground at the same time. And then I also think that it's very difficult for us to figure out something which you're really lifting up, which is how do you build bridges and draw lines? How do you weave together a big community and decide when you actually have to fight? Because this is something too much, the threat to the civil rights of our kids, to teachers' autonomy, to respect for history, to respect for what youth are trying to have achieved. And I think this is going to be a difficult line for us all for the next 5 to 10 years. How do we build bridges, and then how do we draw lines?
So, Tracey, as teacher of the year and being in the classroom, given the polarization that exists with banning books and, talking about culture wars, how does a teacher maneuver in that space?
It's been very, very frightening because our educators have our kids' best interest at heart. And truly, no one is in a classroom trying to teach a specific ideology. What we are doing is teaching educators and classmates to really see one another, the human, right? And their identity and their history and their voice. And many of the state laws that we have, including Georgia's, which is House Bill 1084, it's a divisive concepts bill, it says that educators can't say a number of things, and upon first read, you would agree. Absolutely. No educator should ever tell a child that they should feel victimized or guilty. What's happening is that there's a chilling effect where teachers are afraid. If I talk about racism, if I teach this particular standard at my grade level, I'm going to get in trouble. And so teachers are fearful. I gave advice just yesterday saying, teach the standard. Yes, I know it says Jim Crow. Teach it. Our kids need to know their history, regardless of the skin that they're in. But educators are fearful. They're pulling back and they're choosing not to enter the profession because of the lack of trust, the lack of equitable pay. It's a hard time right now. And teachers are having to flex around these laws by doing things like describing the term instead of naming it. Equity, for example.
So, Abenezer, I was fascinated. You serving on a school board when you were in high school, and I probably, that doesn't happen much in Georgia. I don't think, so, but you're in Nashville, and you talked earlier about the difference between Nashville and the rest of the state of Tennessee. From your perspective, from the students' perspective, what are are students actually listened to, and what can be done to engage students at a higher level?
Yeah, in terms of our students listen to, I would say yes in the moment, but there's this thing where a lot of the times the conversations that happen in education oftentimes come from the student body itself. So when we have major events happening, the movement itself originates from the student body. The problem becomes movements oftentimes lose traction. They stop being trendy. And because there is no institution for the student body to organize itself, there is no town square for students to get together and let their voices be heard, the lack of institution makes it where there's no consistent listening to the voices of students. And it's also a problem with the culture too. I think oftentimes people will lend an ear to the student body, but see that the student body isn't speaking to them. And that's not entirely because the student body has nothing to say, but it's more because there's no established culture where students are listened to consistently. And if I feel like I'm not being listened to, then why waste my breath on something that I essentially feel like is pointless? So I think specifically where I come from, I was part of an all-woman board that was typically seen as very liberal, which was the opposite of the environment of the state itself. So when we look at students, and I interact with students that are outside of my city, it does oftentimes feel like they lack that institutional power. They have the media coverage, they have the traction and the momentum to sometimes be heard, sure, but they don't have that institutional power to actually make change where it can be most applicable.
Jill, in your time at the center, which has been about 4 years, feels like 5 right now, you have really been trying to have what you call truth and reconciliation, and also facing the issues. What have been the challenges and the opportunities to bring these what sometimes taboo subjects to the surface, and how have you been able to maneuver that?
So as a relative newcomer to Atlanta, I was really surprised to know how much of the history I didn't know, but also people in Atlanta didn't know. So in the past couple of years, in 2021, the world seemed to learn about the Tulsa Race Massacre. What a lot of people in our city didn't know, that there was one in Atlanta in 1906. Similar kind of mob violence against the Black community, 4 days of terror. In addition, there was a system in Atlanta of convict leasing and labor where a loophole in the 13th Amendment made it possible for Black people to be enslaved. You could be enslaved if you committed a crime, and then suddenly there were all kinds of crimes created, like walking on the grass or spitting or not having a job, that people were arrested for and then put into servitude. This history in our city has been erased, and it's been erased for a variety of reasons. A lot of economic reasons about attracting people to the city, attracting business to the city, and at the same time, there's a veneration around Atlanta of figures who were Confederate leaders. Things are named for Confederate generals, and so there's this public memory that exists that tells one story, and there's a truth that has been erased. And so part of understanding how to teach civil rights history is really understanding how to teach Reconstruction, which is, I would say, one of the issues is that in not telling the history accurately, there are periods of history that Americans really don't know or understand. And so we have unearthed this history. We have annualized the anniversary of the 1906 Race Massacre. And in doing that, what we've done is tried to find descendants on both sides of that massacre, white descendants of people impacted and Black descendants, and bring them together for conversation. We don't call it reconciliation because, as our speaker pointed out, there's nothing to reconcile to. That's not a history we want to say existed and we want to recreate. We call it transformation. And so how do you bring people together to model the kinds of conversations that could be truly healing and move towards a different future? And understanding where we've been is essential to understanding where we are. If you don't understand the cycle of progress and backlash and progress and backlash, you can't understand this moment. We're in a moment of backlash against progress. And you certainly can't map out where we're going. And so in unearthing this history and telling the stories of the people who were affected by it, we hope to generate some empathy. We have learned in the history field that sometimes people have more empathy for historical actors than they do for people around them today. They see more humanity in who came before. And so can we bring some of that understanding to people who live out the legacy of our history? And so that's how we're trying to do it. Unearthing these events to show that these are part of our shared past. They're the history of our democracy. And how do we come together to have a multicultural, pluralistic democracy going forward where everybody is treated with respect that they were denied in the past?
Kamau, you come to this from two different viewpoints. Working at Georgia Tech from an academic viewpoint and also working at Google, the corporate standpoint. How does a conversation of equity fit into both of your work environments?
I think, as Jill points out, the time that we're in makes all of this difficult. And I think we have to kind of call a spade a spade. So we're operating, this is in Georgia. We have, as Tracey alluded to, there are laws here that ban you from saying certain things. In the university system of Georgia, we've seen inventories of faculty who are teaching courses that have to do with reconciliatory history, whether that is appropriate or not. We don't even get that deep into the nuance. There is also, just following the overturn of affirmative action from the SCOTUS decision recently, there were 13 attorneys general who sent this kind of shot over the bow to the top 100 corporate institutions in the United States, saying that essentially we're coming for you too. So if you have particular race-targeted initiatives that may be in recruiting, that may be in staffing, that may be in retention, we're coming for you next. And so that has had the chilling effect that you allude to. And I think here one of the challenges is being honest about the confrontation. I think that these allusions to what this representative democracy is, I think there's, to some extent, there's a sense of exceptionalism that is the founding assumption of the way that we're approaching this. And I think empires can fail. I think that this is a particular time where, particularly given the retreat, so we're being asked to burnish what we're saying. Don't say these words, describe them. Use these other ways to assess what the truth actually is. The farther and farther and the more descriptive you get, it becomes abstract. I don't know what justice is anymore because I'm not using the word, I'm using these other things as a proxy. And to that extent, I think it overshadows the foundational challenges that we actually have. And I'll give you one statistic and then I'll stop. We have had, relative to the STEM education.
Like statistics
right.
here.
So one thing that we're challenging, I mean, my area is in computing and STEM education and the like. We've been at this for 20 years. At Georgia Tech, for example, if you want to come to tech, which has become increasingly one of the most elite public institutions in the United States, if you want to do anything at tech, you have to take calculus. We don't even offer anything before calculus. And so there are swaths of this entire region where there are no black students at all who get to calculus in high school. So they're structurally inapplicable to coming to Georgia Tech. And we are the center, the epicenter, the academic epicenter of building the economic future for the city. So what we're saying then is that you, structurally incapable of getting to calculus in the 12th grade, are inaccessible. You're not really valuable in the economic future that we're building for the city. That's how the structural translation actually works. And in order to address that, you have to use the words that describe it exactly. Otherwise, these proxy things are not going to get you there, and then we're going to have a city that's just like San Francisco.
I want this to be a rapid thing, and then I want to summarize what we've heard. If you were a funder for education, where would you spend your money? And if we can go quickly because we have run out of time so quickly, I'm sorry. And we're going to start with you, Kamau.
In capacity building initiatives for institutions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Jill?
Teacher pay.
Teacher pay.
Youth-led initiatives.
Huh?
Youth-led initiatives.
Youth-led initiatives?
Policy advocacy. If you're anything like me, you probably think that the lobbyists and everyone has it covered and we're all good. We need teachers and students down on the Hill every day.
Student organizing for social justice.
Student or
Organizing for social justice. It actually not only helps with the advocacy you're talking about, the research suggests that students who go through social justice training have more resilience and success in college because they've got a story to tell themselves about how what has happened to them, how they've overcome, not individually, not just beating the odds, but changing the odds and working collectively.
Okay, so what have we heard? Quality of education is correlated to the number of white students in a school. We have to confront segregation directly. We are suffering from a bad case of truth decay. We need to teach accurate history and civics. We have to give students the highest representation possible. There's a lack of adaptability in education. There's a full attack on our children's civil rights. We have to let teachers do their job. We need to confront racism and forge common ground at the same time. The two can be done at the same time. How do we build bridges and draw lines? Educators and students should be viewed as human beings. What's happening is that teachers are afraid. Educators are fearful of their jobs by what they do in the classroom. There's no town square where students can be heard. Students don't have the feeling that they are heard. History in our city has been erased. Public memory tells one story while part of our history has not been told. We call it transformation, not reconciliation. We are in a moment of backlash. The time that we're in makes all of this difficult. With the overturn of affirmative action impacting higher education, now that may be coming to corporate America. Empires can fail. There's a retreat from facing our inequities. We have to build capacity. We have to improve teacher pay. We have to support youth-led initiatives. We have to invest in mental health and issues in the classroom. And we have to support students organizing for racial justice so they can be successful in college.
Wow, that was
Thank you. Let's thank our panel for everything that they've done. I appreciate it. I hope I did it in time. Good. Thank you, guys.
Good morning. I'm Richard Tagle. I'm chairperson of the Ed Funders Board of Directors. And don't worry, I'm not going to say anything profound because you will be going to your next sessions in a bit, but I do have a couple of announcements to make sure that you are going to the right places all throughout the conference. But one of the things that I want to make acknowledgments first, I want to thank the board of directors for Ed Funders because I have never witnessed a more hardworking board, especially in a time of transitions, not just our leadership, but throughout the conversation of what Ed Funders is all about. And this past couple of years really have been challenging to all of us. And this board has really been focused on making sure that we are both supporting each and every one of you in this room, as well as leading you in the questions that we have to grapple together. In fact, we were in a meeting until 11 o'clock last night. Whether alcohol was involved, I am not going to mention. So please, Board of Directors, please stand and be recognized. In particular, Nicole thanked the staff, but we also would like to thank two people in particular, Beverly Ross Denny, who is our managing director, and Joshi Hansen, our Chief Programs Officer, who have stepped up in this leadership position during this transition, as has really kept the ship running throughout all of these navigable waters and all of the changes and shifts that we had to make. And I also want to specifically thank Olka for the architecture around this conference. The first 90 minutes has really been amazing. When you leave the conference, please do know that we do take seriously your feedback. The structure, architecture, session designs of the conference is taking into consideration what you have experienced the year before. So there's a couple of format changes. We're responding to that feedback. There's more flexibility, there's more movement. Our theme, after all, is in pursuit of justice, means in pursuit. You are pursuing something. So if you are sitting out in the hallway checking your email, you are not pursuing anything. You are supposed to meet people you haven't met, people in this network who are with you to solve these problems together. We are supposed to be in conversation, in pursuit of what we can do as philanthropists, as grant makers. So please get to know each other. Attend the sessions that you know nothing about. Listen to speakers you have never heard from before. There are new sessions that were designed, funder labs that are really funder only, but really focusing on funder practices. There are shorter snap sessions that quickly go through a lot of best practices. There are deep dives, case studies. There are so many formats. Across the hallway is our collaboratory, where you are going to experience interactive sessions that are engaging and are thoughtful and provocative, that will lead you to ask several questions around what we do as grant makers. There are also certain practices that we are putting in place beginning this year around sustainability, food and environment, as you will experience. Lunch will be, for the most part, will be served in bento boxes so that we are limiting waste. And the Hilton Hotel is also partnering with organizations such as Goodar, Ronald McDonald House, and the Atlanta Food Bank to make sure that whatever we do not use and can be consumable later on is really provided to these organizations. I want to say something about the host event tonight. It is going to be a very different experience. Please get there as early as you can to really absorb this new format. There will be a multimedia program that will feature 3 system-level leaders who will share their stories. These are leadership journeys, as you've never heard before. The whole conference is a journey we're taking together, and we are taking dimensions, different dimensions of music, of poetry, of conversations, of graphs that students don't like. But we are looking at all of these things from different perspectives. So please make sure you make it to tonight's host event. It's going to be a very different, unique experience. Buses will leave at 5:30, and the last bus will leave at 6:15. And before I get off the stage and go to our next session, I just also want to personally thank the Goss twins for being here, flying all the way from Denver. We are so proud of you guys. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the conference.